Welcome to Salute Your Sports Week 11. Kamenenchev, Tom Castleman, Drew Brackett. We've got another fun show planned for you this week. First, we're going to show off Tom Castleman, who is getting in the festive Christmas spirit. Tom, let's take a look at what you got over there.
Yeah, so I got the Santa hat on. This is a hat that I've had for as long as I can remember. This goes way back to my childhood. Still in pretty good condition, although the palm's getting a little bit worn. I probably played with it too much as a kid. And then sweater here, combination of two of my favorite things, Star Wars and Christmas. I find your lack of cheer disturbing. So getting in the Christmas spirit. And definitely looking forward to a good show today where we're going to actually hand out a little bit of Christmas cheer to some of our favorite sporting teams. So looking forward to that.
We will do that at the end of the show. We'll get right into the sports talk, but right before we do it, real quick fact for you, Tom Castleman.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that Drew Brackett doesn't like Star Wars and hasn't seen Star Wars? Can you believe that?
Well, I can. I've actually met a couple people where for that. That's true, and I don't know. It's a niche. It's a widespread niche thing, if that such a thing can exist. But you know,
I mean, I've never seen it really. I've never sat down and watched them. I guess.
Do you have any interest in doing so?
I guess not.
Wow. Well, that's something that Drew will have to do at some point in life. But what Drew has seen is plenty of football games. I think he probably saw the Chiefs and Chiefs game against the Saints there. What a great game that was. The Chiefs pulling out a close win against New Orleans, who, as I said, was the toughest matchup for Kansas City. But we've talked plenty about the Chiefs on this show, so we're not going to talk about that big win. We are going to talk about some of these other teams that are right on the edge of the playoffs in the AFC, NFC, sort of bubble teams, so to speak, of the teams right on the edge of playoffs or no playoffs. We're going to start with the AFC, and really it's kind of going down to the Ravens and the Dolphins for that last spot. Of those two teams, who do you guys think, do you not want to play if you're an AFC?
Well, it's really interesting in the AFC because we have really the obvious two teams are the Dolphins and Ravens, but there's a distinct possibility that Dolphins and Ravens can both win out their last two games to get to 11-5, and then you have the Titans, the Browns, and the Colts, I believe, who are all at 10-4. Where if they just go 1-1, we're going to have a big glob of 11-5 teams that are, and I'm not quite sure exactly all the permutations of who gets out of the playoffs, but in terms of who I think would be the most frightening team, I put this in context that we had the conversation last week with the who's the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to stick with the Indianapolis Colts on this one. I know that Philip Rivers has been playing really well. He can still make that big mistake, but when it comes down to one game in the playoffs, yes, Cleveland and Tennessee can put up points, but I also know that any team can put up points on them. Their defenses are not particularly good. Indianapolis Colts, I think, are capable of getting big stops when they need to, and that's what makes it a little bit more frightening in my mind of a team to face in the playoffs.
Yeah, real quick, the Colts, by the way, Tom, I would say they're near lock for that spot while they play the struggling Steelers this week. The last week of the season, they played the Jaguars, and they already lost to the Jaguars this year. So they're not going to lose twice to the Jaguars, who have not beaten any other team. So the Colts are pretty safe to make it in. Drew, who's your sort of AFC bubble team to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, as far as who gets those final spots, I think the Raiders will likely not get those. So it's going to be between the Dolphins and the Ravens, as you mentioned, and the Ravens have the more favorable schedule. You're at home against the Giants, and then on the road against the Dolphins, or against the Bengals, where the Dolphins on the road against the Raiders and on the road against the Bills. So that's a tough one. I like Miami's defense better than the Ravens, so watch out for the Dolphins. I'll say that.
Yeah, I've got to go with the Dolphins. I think most of America would say they don't want to play the Ravens of those two teams just because the Ravens are kind of clicking in recent weeks. Lamar Jackson, who I like to hate on, is playing much better. He even passed the ball decent this last week, albeit against the Jaguars. But I'll say this, though. It's not the Ravens. Just because they are one-dimensional and Jackson's 0-2 in the playoffs, I think on paper it seems like they're the team to be. You look at the Dolphins on paper, they're actually below average in yards, both on offense and defense. And their offense isn't that great. Like on paper, they shouldn't be, even doing this good. But they're 8-2 in their last 10 games after a 1-3 start. And one of those losses coming to the Chiefs. The reason why I like the Dolphins is there's something special about that ball hawk defense. They forced a turnover in every game this season. 4 of them against the Rams, 4 of them against the Chiefs. They still somehow lost that game. Second lowest points per game. Actually, they might even be the lowest points per game in the NFL now after the Steelers game last night. So they're a very good defense, and they're a defense that finds the ball. That's a team that would be scary for me if you're an offense, especially imagine if they somehow play Pittsburgh. Now, they may play Buffalo. You mentioned those last 2 games. The Raiders are fading. The Dolphins should beat the Raiders. The Bills game will be very interesting because of the seeding. It's possible that the Ravens win the next 2 and they miss out of the playoffs too. But I don't want to play the Dolphins if I'm a team because that defense is scary. They can make a play. They can get a touchdown. They've got very good special teams. And I like Tua. He's going to get better with every single week. He's a young quarterback who didn't have a preseason. Every single week, Tua's going to keep getting better. And guess what? Tua can pass the ball better than Lamar, and that's scary in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the counter that I would bring up to that with the Dolphins is that Tua is also a rookie. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience, and while the talent is undeniably there, we saw a team, they went up against the New England Patriots. The Patriots don't have really any standout players on defense, but with a good coach and a good defensive scheme, you can try to limit some of what Tua is able to do. Turnovers, they've been really fortunate. Turnovers are as much luck as they are skill. In the NFL, you can have some teams that turn over the ball a lot one year. It's not necessarily predictive of how they'll do in future years or even in future games. I think that if the Dolphins are clicking on all cylinders, they can definitely be a huge threat to whoever they're facing, especially if it's a fading team like Pittsburgh. But I think that there's also a very real chance of them having a lower floor in terms of if they're not able to turn the ball over. If Tua is able to get limited by an opposing defensive coordinator, there are some limitations that you can put on the Dolphins team. I mean, you can also put that on the Ravens as well, though. I mean, this is a year where we have a 7th playoff spot available. We would be talking about the Dolphins and the Raiders as outside teams hoping for a lot of luck to get in. So I think, they're a threat for that last spot. But as far as, actually being able to do damage, I don't think I would give either team much of a chance over a likely Bills or possibly Steelers team for that second spot.
Real quick on the Steelers, it's interesting because they play the Colts this week and then they play a hungry Browns team the next week. It's possible they start 11-0 and go 11-5. Is that possible? And then, because I think the Dolphins right now against that one-dimensional Steelers offense that can't can't run the ball rather, they just rely on passing. I think the Dolphins would beat the Steelers. I don't know that they would beat the Bills, but they would beat the Steelers. I feel confident saying that. And the Ravens might beat the Steelers, too, at this point. So.
It would certainly be a compelling matchup. Now, we've talked a good bit about the AFC playoffs. Moving over to the NFC, we actually are seeing a little bit of life out of the NFC East and certainly a lot of intrigue where all 4 teams are somehow still in the playoff hunt. Drew, your Cowboys are still in it. How are you liking the division shaping up heading into the home stretch here?
Yeah, I mean, you got to love that they're still in it mathematically, but the Washington football team, tough loss against the Seahawks, almost came back in that game on Sunday. Cowboys a big win over the 49ers, so I don't know if Ezekiel Elliott, how much longer he'll be out, but Tony Pollard went off. So the Cowboys close at home against the Eagles, and then on the road against the Giants, and it's always that Week 17 game against the Giants that seems to bite them in the bite them in the arm, I guess. So we'll see what happens there.
In the butt. Bite them in the butt.
Didn't want to say that.
You're not going to say the alternate of that, but you can say that.
No, that's fair. This is family-friendly show coming. Come on.
Yes, it is family-friendly. I will say this, though. As interesting as that NFC East is, and we'll get to the teams we think that could be a bubble team out of the playoffs, I do think that division is actually going to end this week. The race is going to be over because if Washington beats Carolina and the Giants lose to the Ravens, which I think both of those things will happen, the division will be wrapped up for Washington, regardless of what happens in the Philly Cowboys game, because Washington is a game and a half ahead of Philly, and they have the tiebreaker on Dallas. So they're hopeful to get Alex Smith back in the show. So I think they get Alex Smith back. I think they beat the Panthers, and Washington is your team out of that division. By the way, they beat the Steelers. They beat the 49ers. They finally lost a 5-point game against Seattle, so they've looked pretty good. But then you've got the Bears, our Chicago Bears from Tom. All of a sudden, their offense looks really good. They've won a few games in a row. But I think the most dangerous team in the NFC bubble is hands down the Arizona Cardinals, without question. And the reason for that is because Kyler Murray is back to running the ball how he used to. They had a 3-game losing streak. He had 5 carries, and 5 carries in those 3 losses. And that's because he had a banged-up shoulder. He's gotten healthier. This last 2 weeks, 13 carries, 8 carries. He got in the end zone this last week. The week before, he put up a bunch of yards. He's a good passing quarterback, no doubt about it, but he's most dangerous when he's running. And that opens up the passing game. It opens up the running game for both him and Drake and the rest of the running backs in Arizona. That's an explosive team. They've got DeAndre Hopkins, who is one of, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. Larry Fitzgerald, the seasoned vet, is still very good. And their defense has been respectable this year. I think if the Cardinals get in there with the running of Kyler Murray, is very difficult to prepare for and very difficult to ad-lib for. In a one-game situation, they can probably beat anyone. Certainly more explosive than the Bears offense, which is playing better. But you look at Washington, you look at the Bears, those teams are not very good on offense, and it's an offense-dominated league. And I think the Cardinals are the team to look out for. I know Miami also isn't very good at offense, and I picked them in the last segment, but their defense is great. None of these other teams are necessarily great on defense. So I like the Cardinals. The Bears are good, but they're not what they used to be.
No, I'm going to go homer on this one and say that the Bears, I think, are actually going to grab that last spot. I'm counting on a couple of things that are as much hope as they are analysis. Bears have an easy game this week against the Jaguars, and then you have, if the Packers beat the Titans, Packers might not have to play an entire game in Week 17. Maybe the Bears are able to kind of get backdoored in that way, considering that the Cardinals are facing the 49ers this week. 49ers have a pretty solid defense. It's just a matter of, Nick Mullins not turning over the football. And then you also have the Rams on the schedule, and the Rams are going to be playing for possibly a shot at that top spot and winning the division, depending on how Seattle does as well. So I think given the schedule, that's a little bit of an issue for the Cardinals. But like I said, it's just as much hope as anything else. As far as do we want to consider the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a bubble team? Because they're a team that's...
They're 2 games ahead of Arizona and 3 games ahead of the Bears. I mean, they'd have to lose out, and Arizona would have to win out, which is possible, but
right.
Tampa Bay is pretty safe in, personally. But I mean, Tampa Bay, I think for obvious reasons, will probably be arguably more dangerous than those teams. But again, you know that I'm selling my Buck stock. I've been selling it the last few weeks. Drew, who are you scared of in the NFC? If you're, the Packers, the Saints, some of those top seeds you may have to face early in the playoffs there.
Well, I mean, you were talking about the Bucks. You've sold the stock. I think they had a pretty good comeback win against the Falcons. They got shut out in the first half of that game, and they go on to win. What was it, by 4? So look out for the Bucks there, Tom. And I wouldn't sell all of your Bucks stock quite yet.
So I've got like one of those, what do you call it, like those betting covers, because earlier in the year I was all about the Bucks making the Super Bowl. Now I'm all about them not making the Super Bowl. So no matter what happens, I'll be right.
Oh, yes.
That's the beauty of a week-to-week
season. As long as you're right in some way, shape, or form.
Well, Drew, and it's an interesting point that you make about the Buccaneers and just your sense of how they were shut out in the first half against the Atlanta Falcons of all defenses, and then they put up 34 points in the second half. That's what makes the Buccaneers the scariest team to me, because something that you can't sell short. I know Tom Brady has not been as talented or as good as he's been in previous years, but you can't discount the playoff experience.
Yeah, he did throw a deep ball touchdown to Antonio Brown, though. And Dez Bryant also found the end zone this weekend. So
for the Ravens. Yeah, no, blast from the past is a great way of putting it. It's just one of those things where if the Buccaneers can click, and I think, Tom Brady being in the playoffs, he's been in more big games than anybody else in the NFL right now. So I think that's definitely something that'll actually work a little bit to his advantage psychologically, and perhaps a little bit against whoever the Buccaneers are playing, because they're not going to be able to breathe a little bit easier. Their defenses are going to have to be on point against a legendary quarterback.
And don't forget about Giovanni Bernard last night. Didn't he have a couple touchdowns?
He did, yeah. He's kind of been up and down this year as well. Seemingly never playing.
He's been in the league for 20 years.
Yeah, he's been fantastic for the Bengals, filling in for Joe Mixon, who's been out for a good portion of the year on injured replacement. Yeah.
Yeah. So really interesting. I would like to see the Bucs put together 4 quarters. They haven't seemed to have been able to do that yet, so that's why they're concerning. I think they would probably. I think they're the 5 right now. And they would, or are they the 6? They're the 6. Which one are they? They're the 6, I think, right now.
I think so, because Rams are 5. Yeah.
Okay, right. So if they're the 6, they would have a tough matchup. But they can get the 5, though. In theory, they can.
Aren't they the 5?
No, I think the Rams are still the 5, Drew. Let me look it up right now.
I think they're the 5. Because you got Packers, Saints, Seahawks, and then the Rams are 9-5, Bucs are 9-5.
Right, but it lists the Rams ahead, and they have the tie break because they beat the Bucs. So right now the Bucs are the 6.
Oh, I thought they're right behind the Rams. Rams are the 4. Unless I'm missing a team.
Based on divisions,
yeah. The baloney, yeah. The NFC East.
Washington.
The baloney.
They're getting a home game.
Wow.
They're hosting a home game.
Well, at least have Dallas host.
Tom, I don't think so. Tom, you brought up an interesting point with the Packers. If they rack up clinching the NFC the last week of the season, that'd be quite a question. Do you try to knock out your division rival? Also, they would have to buy. How much do they want to play for rust? The Chiefs will have the same question, too, by the way, because with the Steelers' loss, the Chiefs will clinch the best record in the league after they beat Atlanta this week. So it'll be interesting to see if they would rest their guys, given that both of those teams know that they're going to have a bye week. Maybe we'll get into this more next week, but real quickly, if you're the Packers or Chiefs, do you rest your guys week 17? Especially for Green Bay, a chance to knock off the Bears.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted question. I think a lot of the factors are the same. You have it between Mahomes and Rodgers for winning MVP, and you know that's going to be big on both of their minds. I think from the competitive standpoint, they're both going to want to go the whole game. And then, with the bye week, I think it'd be perfectly reasonable for both teams to do kind of like a preseason type of thing where it's like, okay, we'll send you out for the first half, and then in the second half we'll give some of the backups some playing time. Mostly just to avoid injury more than anything else. I know rust is going to be a little bit of a concern, but what good does it do you if Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce, cut and like injure a knee or something like that? I think they'll probably play it safe and take full advantage of having, kind of like 1.5 bye weeks a little bit. And then, I don't know, man, about the Packers if they'll just have like a little bit of that schadenfreude of putting the Bears out of their misery. I'm going to hope not, but it would not surprise me at all if that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah, the Bears can only get in if they basically win out and Arizona goes 1-1. But they do have the tiebreaker. I understand over Arizona as of now, but that may change based on conference division records. We'll keep that real, tight to the vest. We'll keep it close. But
for sure.
NFL playoffs will be decided based on record. No judgment there. College football playoff, though, a lot of question marks, a lot of judgment, a lot of opinions. We've got a lot of things to talk about the CFP. This will be kind of our final chat about that. At the end, did they get it right? Did they not? Let's start off with the big one, the top four. Alabama's number 1. Clemson's number 2. Everyone agrees about that. Ohio State is 3. Notre Dame is 4. Then A&M is 5. And Oklahoma 6. We'll get to Cincinnati a little bit later, too. But in terms of the top 4, did they get it right? Was A&M perhaps deserving over Notre Dame? They lost by 24 to Clemson and still got in the playoff. What do you guys think? Did they get it right?
Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I think they got this one right. It's tough to leave a 10-1 Notre Dame team out, especially because they beat Clemson earlier in the year. And then Ohio State, when they won the Big Ten championship, they went undefeated. So I know they only played 6 games, but, they're a talented squad. So I think the committee got it right with the 4 teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if anything, I might have a little bit of a quibble of, Ohio State over Notre Dame in terms of flip-flopping that matchup. I understand why they did it. They wanted to avoid a round 3 between Clemson and Notre Dame. Also, we saw, Notre Dame win in overtime over Clemson without Trevor Lawrence for the Tigers, and then we saw them lose by a considerable margin when Trevor Lawrence did play for the Tigers. So it's one of those things where they want to keep it somewhat competitive looking. I don't think you're really going to get that with Alabama and Notre Dame. There's also a lot of good storylines by setting it up the way that they did. Alabama and Notre Dame playing for the national championship. Manti Te'o was the middle linebacker. I don't remember exactly what year that was. And then, of course, last year, Ohio State and Clemson facing off in the semifinals for that college football championship game. So they went, storyline on this one, I think, as much as they went merit. As far as A&M, I know their only loss was to Alabama at the beginning of the year, but I don't think that they played a particularly strong schedule, at least not measurably so over Notre Dame. So I have no problem with them being on the outside looking in.
Yeah, so, it came down to Notre Dame and A&M both had 1 loss. A&M lost by 28 to Alabama. Clemson lost by, not Clemson, Notre Dame lost by 24 to Clemson. A&M's big win was Florida. It was a very nice win. They won by 3 at home on that one. But I think Notre Dame's win over Clemson is even more impressive than Florida because Florida's kind of a one-sided team. They played great on offense, but they're bad on defense. And I know Trevor Lawrence wasn't there, but his backup QB played great in that game. He played outstanding. And a win over Clemson is more impressive than a win over Florida. Notre Dame had the best win in the country of all. Literally, beating Clemson was the best win any team had in the country because no one beat Alabama. So you've got that on your resume. They also played a couple more games, and they had some other nice wins against North Carolina. And it's not like they were sweating out most of their games. They were pretty convincing the whole season. A&M had a few games there against LSU. They didn't look that impressive. I certainly think Notre Dame deserved it over A&M. Also, I think Ohio State did deserve the 3 seed regardless of matchups just because they do account for Big Ten titles. They did win the Big Ten title. They did have an undefeated season. I know they played less games, but I was actually more impressed by Ohio State than most people are just because of the fact that They have won their two big games against good teams, close-ish games against Northwestern and Indiana. Justin Fields played pretty poorly in both games, and he actually has played very well in big games last year. So the fact that you can win rather convincingly, I know the Indiana game was close, but they led it 35-7. They've shown they can win with their defense. They've shown they can win with their run game, over 300-400 rush yards. And they haven't played their best football yet. I think that's another thing that's lost on Ohio State. You know, they play a week, they get a week off, they started later. They haven't been able to get a rhythm going yet. So I think, you know, in all honesty, I think Ohio State is the third best team in the country at this point. So I have no issue with the 1 through 4. I think it was spot on. Another big question mark is, though, we had A&M was 5. We can agree there. 6, though, interesting enough, was Oklahoma. A lot of people are talking about Cincinnati. Cincinnati was still all the way down to 8. And then Florida, with 3 losses, is still ahead of them at 7. What do you guys think about Cincinnati being behind Florida and Oklahoma? Do you like it? Do you agree with it? Because I think we're going to have a very different opinion here.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just shows that the committee doesn't really value the group of 5 teams. I think that's what it shows you. As far as the good or bad, I mean, it is what it is. You know, we're in bowl season. A lot of football games. We got Florida, Oklahoma. That'll be a good game. And then we have, who is Cincy? Cincy's playing.
Georgia.
I just thought, Georgia. So that should be a really good game as well. But it just shows the value really doesn't value the group of 5 very much. And if you're a group of 5 fan, that's tough to swallow.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's the whole argument of like, well, do you think that they'll actually, you know, win the game? Well, that's why they play. You know, I think that, you know, even if it is going to be a little bit lopsided, that it's not up to the committee to take that into account before the game is even, you know, played on the field. Like, they've earned the opportunity to show that they can play with the blue chip programs. I think as far as Oklahoma goes, I don't really have much issue with them in the 6th spot, and I'll admit a little bit of that is based on they started out slow, but then as they came on later in the season, they beat some quality opponents, beating Oklahoma State, Iowa State, beating Texas. I'm pretty sure they beat Texas. So I'm fine with them earning that Big 12 championship for the 6th spot. Cincinnati should absolutely be ahead of Florida. Florida has lost 3 games now, and granted, you know, one of them to a 5th-ranked A&M team, one to the number 1 overall Alabama Crimson Tide. But they had a stupid penalty and lost to a really bad LSU team. They should be penalized a lot more for that. I think Cincinnati should be ahead of Florida, absolutely.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you there, just because I think the way the committee based it is, who do they think are the best teams? And they did sit down and say, who do we think would win this matchup? Florida has 3 losses, but you take a look at who they lost to. They lost by 6 to number 1 Alabama. They lost on the road by 3 to A&M, whose only loss is to Alabama. They lost to 2 top 5 teams in the country, and their embarrassing loss against LSU, albeit was a pretty bad loss, but you take a look at this Cincinnati team. They had a couple games where they were off their game. They only beat in this most recent AAC championship game. They beat Tulsa by 3 only. They beat UCF by 3. Well, you know, those UCF, by the way, had a very down year this year, in case you were paying attention. So you're going to have a down game at some point, and when you have, you know, when you're playing weaker teams like Cincinnati, you have your down game, you can still win the game. So I just think that Florida is a better football team. I mean, Alabama was beating everyone by double digits. They beat Georgia by 17. They beat A&M by 28. They beat, you know, every game they've won by at least 15 or more. The fact that Florida was within 6 points should tell you something about Florida. They had an off game against LSU. They made a boneheaded play. You know what? That guy doesn't throw the shoe. Florida's going to win that game. Mm-hmm. Also, LSU does have some pride. They were trying to not have a losing season. Granted, they've lost a ton of their players because of going to the NFL. But that's a team that won the national championship. That's LSU. That's Ed Orgeron, and they're a team that played much better down the stretch. You look at how poorly they started. Well, they improved. So that LSU loss isn't maybe quite as bad as people think it is. My thought on the group of 5 is, quite honestly, I don't feel bad for them, just because I think that these teams, if you're a group of 5 team and you want to make the playoff, you got to go big or go home. The big dogs are not going to come to your house. They're not going to schedule a home and away with you. That's just how it works. It may be unfair, but that's how it is. If you want to make the playoff as a group of 5 team, you have to be willing to play on the road, and maybe you don't take as big of a pay as some of these other small schools do. You go on the road. You don't worry about how much money they're paying you or all that type of deal. You play at Alabama. You play at Florida, at Ohio State, at Oklahoma. You hope you catch one of those teams in a bad game. Maybe not Alabama. Maybe play Florida or Oklahoma, because those teams may have an off game. You hope to win that game, and you get yourself in the playoff, because, I mean, it's hard. It's complicated. But when you look at the resume, it's like, what have you done for me? They haven't beaten anyone good. So, and, you look at some of these other teams, they're playing better competition constantly. I know we all want to cheer for the underdog. That's what we do in America. We want to cheer for the underdog. We love seeing that story. We want to see them get a chance. But what happens in those 1-4 playoff games? I mean, no matter who gets that 4 seed, Alabama and the 1 seed typically crushes everyone. So what are you going to get by putting in a team that's going to get crushed anyways? Not much. So if you're those teams, you need to be willing to take a chance. And in this pandemic year, you didn't really have that opportunity because of scheduling. But I'm saying going forward in the future, you need to be willing to take that chance. If you want to make the playoff, you got to get the schedule. You can't complain and whine, and you're going to have to do something that's unfair. Yes, it's unfair. You should be able to schedule a home and home. But if that's not how the system works, you're going to have to go on the road and beat one of those top 10 programs, one of those blue bloods. And then if you do that, then you're in the playoff. It's that simple. It's easy. That's the solution for the group of 5 teams. The other issue with the group of 5 is they don't really have that consistent program. They really don't. Like, if you had, like, Boise State is on borderline of that level, but they were down this year. They struggled. We had UCF approaching that territory where they're like a powerhouse, like Gonzaga is in college hoops. Well, UCF faded. They had a bad year. Now it's Cincinnati this year. Memphis at one point had a good year. There's no really single team that is consistently good. I think if we have a team like that, like if we have like a Gonzaga where they put Gonzaga as a 1 seed in the tournament, if Cincinnati becomes a powerhouse for 5-6 years in a row, sure, they can do that, but they haven't earned it. They haven't earned that ability to do that. Also, USC, by the way, is a traditional powerhouse. They were 5-0, and they knew the Pac-12 was hard. So it's not like USC was ranked in the top 5 just because they're USC and they're undefeated. So I don't know that this is necessarily only a bias towards the group of 5. It's a simple thing as the committee likes to see who have you played on your schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, that's fair, but I wouldn't go comparing football to basketball. You just because football is just such a different game. It's such a physical game, and you're seeing the top recruits go to, they're physically bigger than group of 5 recruits in general, right? Like, you have these 300-pound plus linemen.
That's the whole point, though. There's not a group of 5 team that is good enough to truly compete for a national title. And I'm saying that, like, if there's a program that's consistently succeeding like Gonzaga does, that's a different story. They can earn some leeway, but there's no consistent group of 5 team that has proven that and earned that over the years. Like, if there was a team that was, like, undefeated every year, eventually I would say you got to give them a chance. But you don't have that team from the group of 5. It's a different team every year. You don't have like a sort of like an Alabama of the group of 5.
Yeah, I mean, no, of course not. I wouldn't expect there to be one because, usually the recruits are going to pick a Power 5 school, if they're that good. Yeah, that's a complicated answer for sure, but I don't think we'll really ever see a Group of 5 team who's, dominant for 6 years in a row. That's just incredibly tough to do.
Right. So I think unless they go to an 8-team system, the only shot that the Group of 5 has to make the college football playoff is if they play on the road at one of those elite teams. Because if under the current 4-team format, the Group of 5 is not getting in, and they need to stop whining about it, and they need to go ahead and do something about it. Because the committee has shown that you're a Group of 5, you have no chance at the playoff. No chance. Cincinnati was undefeated and they were 8th. You have 0 chance unless you go and schedule, you play at Florida, you play at Ohio State, something like that.
Oh, I agree with you absolutely, but I think that it's not all about the college football playoff. I think there's also a big thing to be said for just major bowl games. I think that's where you have a team where, yes, Cincinnati hasn't played an outstanding schedule. Same for Coastal Carolina. That's a team that I would have liked to see a little bit higher in the rankings as well. A team that did go out and schedule additional games, trying to pick up, I believe it was Liberty, and then that canceled, so they slid in a BYU instead to play some, again, not outstanding competition, but better competition. I think that a team like Coastal Carolina should be given a New Year's Six bowl game. I think that the bowl, outside of the college football playoff, the bowl should be used as a reward and also a little bit of a measuring stick of, okay, you've played this season, you've gone undefeated. Let's see how you do against this, 1 or 2 or 3 loss Power 5 program. In my opinion, I'd like to see them instead of Oregon on the New Year's Six Bowl, but I understand that Pac-12 deserves a little bit of representation as well. Maybe have Coastal Carolina try Texas A&M. If we're not going for college football playoff, at least give them good bowl games that act as a reward for getting through the season that they got through, and as a way of better recruiting. I mean, recruits aren't going to choose Coastal Carolina because they beat Liberty. If they go up and they show out against Texas A&M, that can get some extra recruits in the door that starts to help build those programs up a little bit more. But, football isn't the same as basketball where, you can have some parity showing up because, over a tournament, you're going to see some upsets happen. Football is just too big of an attrition sport to allow that to happen. But it'd still be nice to have a little bit more opportunity for the little guys, not necessarily in the college football playoff, but certainly in big bowl games when they earn them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I would love to see that. Certainly, I do think, while I may sound like I'm downing Cincinnati, I do think Cincinnati, or rather Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati in general, Coastal Carolina at this point is probably a better football team than Oregon. Certainly more deserving, considering the fact that Oregon has had 2 losses. I agree with you absolutely on that, Tom. I'm talking about the playoff is meant for a top 4 team. But outside of other bowls, I like that. I like the idea of having a measuring stick. I'm all for that. So, sure, put Coastal Carolina in instead of the Pac-12. Now, I'm not going to get into this whole big debate. What I've pushed for is an 18 playoff. You get your 5 Power 5 conference champs. You get your 2 wild cards, and you get your 1 Group of 5 team. That way you give the Group of 5 a chance to play in it, as my dog is popping in. That's the system that I believe is most fair, but under the current system, it's just not going to work out. Real quick, Cincinnati and Georgia, who wins that game?
I'm not giving up any information on our bowl pick'em. Pass.
Pass. I think that's going to be a good game. It's going to be a...
By the way.
Huh?
Georgia's about a touchdown favorite.
Yeah, that one, it's interesting. It's a noon Eastern game on New Year's Day. So, obviously, Georgia, they're 9th in the country, Cincinnati's 8th. So, I think it should be very competitive, and it's a chance for the Bearcats to, show the country, hey, this is who we are.
Yeah, so real quick for the viewers, we are in a college bowl pick'em thing. We do a Bowl Mania tradition every year where we pick all the bowl games. I won last year. I went back and looked at it. I did win last year since I was curious.
Of course you did.
We're all tied this year. We usually do confidence points. This year we're just doing straight up because of all the possible bowl cancellations, etc. So far we're all tied 2 games in, by the way.
Well, Common, I haven't looked back in the last 7 years of doing this, so I'll have to really go back in the archives and figure out who's won. I don't remember the first year we did it. Do you?
I don't remember the first year, but I think it's going to be a really fun competition. It usually goes down to that last game or second to last game, so I think it's going to be very close. Drew did do a really good job of picking the conference champions this last week. A lot of upsets. He hit one of them with Oregon. Tom and I had USC, so we'll see.
Did I? I don't actually remember. How did I do? What did I do?
Well, you did better than us because we went chalk and you picked an upset and you got it right. And there was
okay.
Upsets. So.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go.
There you
go. That was only last week. Goodness gracious. All right.
Yeah, time is really crazy. Well, we'll break down more of these big matchups next week. Actually, we'll talk about the CFP and who's going to win it, and maybe we'll talk about some of the New Year's Six games. I don't know if maybe we won't, since we don't want to reveal picks. We'll see, but we'll have plenty of more on the weeks to come on college football. College football winding down. Meanwhile, the NBA just starting up. So we're going to do our NBA preseason preview. We're going to talk who wins it all, who makes the finals, who makes the playoffs that didn't make it last year. But first, we're going to start with who you guys think will be the NBA MVP this season.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good options. If you just look at some of the wagering odds to see some of the favorites, you have Luka Doncic is up at the top, I believe, is the current favorite. Of course, you always have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and then Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is the reigning back-to-back MVP, has a very good chance, obviously, of being the first three-peat MVP player since, trivia question for either you guys, do you know who the last three-peat MVP was?
Larry Bird?
Correct. Larry Bird in the mid-'80s. Well done. Author of one of our favorite videos of passing highlights, which is just fantastic to watch on YouTube. I don't see Giannis getting a three-peat this time around simply because, voters are weird. They don't want to see one player get it, too much one way or the other. I'm going to go long shot on this one. I'm actually going to go with Damian Lillard of the Portland Trail Blazers to win MVP. He is surrounded with good but not necessarily great talent as far as having, a top, 5 or top 10 or top 15 NBA talent beside him. And I think the Trail Blazers have a decent shot of being a top 4 team in the West, and that Lillard will be carrying them there. I'm going to go for a dark horse on this one. Might not necessarily be a popular pick, but I think Damian Lillard is who I'm going to roll with for MVP this year.
It's funny, when I was looking at this, I didn't look at the odds. I just kind of went by instinct. So I picked Kevin Durant to win the MVP. He's coming back off the injury. I think he's going to play well off the injury. And he also has a guy named Kyrie Irving who will distribute him the ball. So we'll see how, hopefully those guys get along. I know Kyrie's kind of a different guy from what I read. So if he gets along with him, he can put up 32 a game, no problem.
Kyrie is different. How much he'll distribute come the end of the game and how much of a distraction he'll be, that remains to be seen. First off, before I comment on your pick, Drew, which is a real possibility, I've got to completely disagree with Tom Castleman. I thought that was an outrageous MVP pick, with all due respect.
That's fine.
Because I'm not convinced the Blazers, granted, they had a lot of injuries last year, but these guys barely got in the playoffs last year. And, you got Chris Paul going to the Suns. You got Stephen Curry back for the Warriors. You've got all these young bloods, Ja Morant and Zion Williamson. The Mavericks are going to have Porzingis back, who are one of the lower seeds. I'm not even convinced the Blazers are going to make the playoffs. And if they do, I certainly don't think they're going to be a top 4 seed. You got to keep in mind these guys were under 500 last year. And the thing with Damian Lillard is he's more of a traditional scoring point guard. He's not necessarily a great rebounder. In the modern day game, we look at some of these perimeter players who are getting 8 to 9 rebounds a game. He's not going to average a triple-double, and I don't think he's going to get 10 assists. So, and he's not an incredibly efficient player like he was last year more than ever, especially in the bubble. But throughout his career, we haven't seen that. I just don't see how he's going to wrap up enough stats and be on a good enough team to be a legitimate MVP contender, who I think we'll see. I do agree with you in the sense that it won't be Giannis. There's no way he's going to win 3 in a row. Larry Bird was winning 3 in a row back then. That's when the Celtics were really top dog, and it was kind of like the Celtics and Lakers were so far ahead of everyone else. And that was kind of an anomaly. I am proud of myself for getting that trivia question right, but I knew it. Go watch that Larry Bird, Larry Legend passing, shooting. That guy is really, really talented. Kevin Durant, I think, is a real possibility for MVP. I would say Durant is second or tied for second best player in the league with Stephen Curry. I will say Stephen Curry would be my number 2 or number 3 pick. Look out for Curry this year just because Klay's not there. Durant's not there. I think Steph's already won this MVP twice. I think he's going to go crazy. He's actually been playing very well in preseason. I know we don't want to look at preseason too much, but he had a 29-point game. He's been shooting the ball well. So I think Stephen Curry is back. But to me, I think it's going to go down to LeBron James and Luka, just because those guys are probably the best along with Giannis. I think if LeBron really goes for the MVP, he's going to get it just because the Lakers should get the best record in the regular season, and they tend to love going to MVP with the guy on the best regular season record. And if LeBron has the best regular season record, they're going to have a hard time denying him that MVP just because I expect him to be, top in the league in assists again, be up there in points as well. And he's going to be great. But if LeBron does the whole I'm going to rest type deal scenario, it's going to be Luka. Just because Luka, you brought up the reasons for Damian Lillard, why he can possibly win an MVP. He has a good supporting cast, but not necessarily someone great to challenge him. Well, that's exactly Luka Doncic's case. Porzingis, when he gets healthy, is a pretty good option. He's going to be out the beginning of the season, but Porzingis is nowhere near Luka. And they're different players. Lillard actually has to share the ball with McCollum on the perimeter. It's the Luka show in Dallas. And he rebounds well, and he gets triple-doubles. Like, he's a very good player. Mm-hmm. You look at some of the other candidates. Durant is going to have Kyrie Irving there. I don't know how that's going to work. You look at LeBron. He does have Anthony Davis, so that could take away from him a little bit. So Luka would be the guy to look out for. It comes down to whether LeBron James plays enough games or not. And if he doesn't, I'm going to go with Luka because he's got the most well-rounded offensive game, with the exception of maybe LeBron James himself. I mean, Luka was, by the way, last year, 6th in points per game and 3rd in assists per game. No one else was in those 2 categories in the top 6, and he nearly averaged the triple-double, which seems to wow the voters. They get really into the triple-double statistic. So Luka is going to be fun to watch this year. Luka versus LeBron on NBA Christmas Day, I will be tuning into that one. But individual success aside, who's the team, we'll start with the East, who you think can make it to the – actually, let's start with the West because the West is more interesting. Who's a team out of the West that could make the playoffs or that will make the playoffs that didn't make it last year? And for the record, we're not doing any of this play-in stuff. I know we've got the play-in games where the 7 and 10 play each other, 8 and 9 play each other. I don't want you to reason me and tell me they're going to get in the play-in. I want a team that will be in the final 8, which they consider the playoffs, that didn't make it last year out of the West.
I mean, if we're doing the West, I think the Golden State Warriors will probably be in the playoffs this year. I know it's just kind of Steph and everybody else, but you got to believe Curry being back is going to vault them into at least an 8 seed this season in that competitive Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, the Warriors are a pretty easy choice to pick for this one, especially when you have as many players coming back from injury. You have Kelly Oubre being brought in to kind of sort of replace Klay Thompson at least a little bit. You have James Wiseman, who is a raw player but very talented. I think the Warriors are an easy pick to get in. If you want something a little bit spicier of a take, because I think we could have a little bit of multiple teams shuffling in and out of the playoffs with the Thunder falling out. And there was one other team that was in that I think could slide out of the playoffs, but don't sleep on the Phoenix Suns. Like you mentioned, common trading for Chris Paul to kind of complement Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. I wouldn't be surprised if they were another team that has a really good shot of making it in the West as well.
Yeah, those are kind of the two teams I was going to go with. I can actually see both of them making it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say one thing that people are overlooking a little bit. Certainly it's not Klay Thompson, or Kevin Durant, but I don't necessarily agree with the notion. Here's my dogs again. But I don't necessarily agree with the notion that it's just Steph Curry and everybody else, just because they did pick up some good players. Andrew Wiggins joined the team late last year, I believe, but he's a 20-point-per-game guy in his career, averaged 22 points per game last year. 22 points in the NBA is not shabby. Also, not that far off what Klay Thompson was doing. Obviously, I think Klay is better than Andrew Wiggins, but I think Andrew Wiggins is a pretty good player. You brought up Kelly Oubre, also about 19 points per game last year. So this isn't like the Warriors last year where Curry went down and they had literally no one. They have brought in some reinforcements, and Curry is going to have some help on that team. So I would lock in the Warriors to be a playoff team, assuming Curry does in fact stay healthy. I think the team that you're looking for that won't make it this year is the Thunder because Chris Paul left. And the team that really might not make it is the Blazers, the team who you're picking to get the MVP from Lillard. Certainly the Rockets, if they get rid of Harden or if things are really messed up there. But I think the Rockets will find a way to get in. I think the Blazers are going to come up short. I think the Thunder will come up short from last year, and I think you're going to have the Warriors and Suns making the playoffs. And I'm not convinced that the Warriors are going to be an 8 seed. I could see them getting closer to a 6 seed, maybe a 5 seed. I'm expecting much bigger things from the Warriors than apparently anybody else is. So, but the East is where it gets interesting because the East, you look at some of the top 7 teams out of the East. You look at the Heat, you look at the Bucks, you look at the Pacers, you look at the Nets. Who else am I missing? The Celtics, the Raptors. 7 of the 8 teams that made it last year are pretty much a lock to make it this year. Maybe Indiana won't make it, but I would still feel pretty safe on picking them. So it really kind of goes down to that 8 seed, which was the Orlando Magic last year. So who maybe gets that 8 seed? Because the East is pretty weak when we get to about 8 to 12. 1 through 7 actually pretty good, but 8 through 12, 13 not as good.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to feel.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's kind of hard to feel comfortable, picking among the options out of the Eastern Conference. But I think I'll go with the Atlanta Hawks to be making the playoffs with that 8th spot. They have a lot of young talent and added some free agents in an attempt to kind of get into like an NBA hell type of situation where I think that they're going to be good to make it to like that 6 to 8 range. But I think they're more intent on making the playoffs consistently to keep Trae Young happy and invested in wanting to sign that lucrative Supermax contract instead of trying to force his way out of Atlanta. But you look at who they've added with Bogdan Bogdanovic. You look at them bringing in Danilo Gallinari. They traded for Clint Capella last year. And then they still have some talent, some incumbent talent with John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish a little bit coming off the bench. And then, of course, Trae Young is a phenomenal point guard in terms of scoring and passing the ball. So, I think the Hawks are probably the most likely pick for me to come out of the East. But certainly not a whole lot of variance, as you mentioned. I think we're going to see a lot of the same last year come playoff time.
Yeah, it's some interesting teams to pick from, and I'm gonna go back to the well as we were talking a few weeks ago now. The Charlotte Hornets, the hometown Charlotte Hornets here in North Carolina. The signing of Gordon Hayward, a big addition for them, and then you have LaMelo Ball, who's been balling out in the preseason games. That guy just making amazing passes left and right. So a lot of young guys, and Gordon Hayward be the leader of that team, and I think they could get that 8th seed in the East.
Yeah, I disagree just because LaMelo Ball is highly overrated. I think one of the season games he didn't make a single shot. He was like 0 for 8, and he made like 3 or 4 great passes, and we're excited by a guy who can't shoot a basketball to save his life. I definitely disagree with the Hornets making the playoffs. I think they're so far away, even with Gordon Hayward. Tom and I are oddly really on the same page today because the team I'm picking is the Hawks. Trae Young, probably the most underrated player in the NBA right now. Maybe Bradley Beal, I guess, is up there too. Didn't get his respect for all those points. But considering taking into account the points and assists, Trae Young was one of the top guys in the NBA, right below Luka and LeBron. Kind of, if you look at total points combined for a team, very good player. They made some nice moves to help him out. The Hawks are who I would pick. But one other team to look out for that neither of you brought up would be the Detroit Pistons. They've been in the playoffs consistently, and if Derrick Rose, there's some talk about him getting traded. But if Rose stays there, Blake Griffin stays healthy, it's really about staying healthy with those two guys. I think a Rose-Griffin combination could sneak into the playoffs. For me, it's between the Hawks and Pistons for that last playoff spot.
I hope they have a roster spot available for a couple extra knees in case they need it.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Maybe they could bring Vince Carter out of retirement.
He had such a nice farewell tour last year. I hope that they don't do that. So we've talked about the bottom of both of these conferences, or at least the bottom of the contending teams for both of these conferences. Time to talk about the very tip top, who we think is going to be meeting up in June, I think, if everything goes to schedule. The NBA Finals. Who do you guys like coming out of the East? And then later on, we'll be covering who's coming out of the West.
Yeah, I think the East is the intriguing one just because I don't know, we'll get into the West more. I think it's the Lakers. I think it's pretty safe, but we'll get into that more. The East is wide open this year. It is crazy how wide open it is because we had the Bucks re-signing Giannis, and they had the best record 2 straight years. They added Drew Holiday, added a few nice pieces around Giannis. Certainly on paper, Milwaukee looks improved. We have the Nets getting Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They actually got them the previous year, but they're actually going to get them both on the court for the first time. Durant, by the way, has looked very good in preseason as well. Had a few dunks, shooting well. You have the Celtics with Tatum and Brown, Kemba Walker, those two guys waiting for the next step. The Raptors always seem to be there. They play great defense. They play together. The Sixers with Doc Rivers coming in, and Embiid and Simmons, if healthy. We forget 2 years ago when the Raptors won the title with Kawhi Leonard there, he needed a buzzer beater or almost buzzer beater at the end in Game 7 to beat the 76ers. So don't forget about Philly in that conference as well. And, of course, I haven't even talked about the Miami Heat, who actually made the NBA Finals and are probably getting underlooked given the amount of young talent they had. It is so wide open, guys. What do you think?
I'm going to go top shelf with this one. I'm going to go with the Nets. We saw a team that made the playoffs last year without Durant for the entire season. I believe without Kyrie for the entire season. I don't remember if that's exactly correct.
But they didn't play late.
So they got into the playoffs. I don't think they had a winning record. I think they were a couple games off of a winning record, but they've shown that with the team that they have around those two superstars, that they can get into the playoffs. So when you add in those two stars at the top, I think that they have great top-end talent, and then something that we don't always see when it comes to these contending teams with superstars, or with multiple superstars, is the depth. That there are some players that contributed to a playoff team last year that simply there's no space for them in the rotation this time around. So I think that they have the talent to make it through the regular season. I could definitely see giving Kevin Durant a little bit of a break, giving Kyrie Irving a little bit of a break throughout the year. They have the talent to kind of make up for that, get them towards the top end of the East, and then I have them coming out when all is said and done.
Yeah, totally agree there. Give me the Nets. Durant, Irving, LeVert, Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, Joe Harris. I mean, they're a legit team, and I think they're going to be able to beat the Bucks in the playoffs, and so that's how I see the East, the Nets coming out of the East.
So I've been going back and forth on this, kind of changing my mind constantly. I have it down to 3 teams. I'm more like 34% sure. So I think it's a virtual toss-up. The 3 teams I have are the Nets, as you mentioned. Also the Heat, who made it there this past year, and the Bucks are my 3rd team. Then I kind of narrowed it down to 2, just because it's hard to pick 2 every year. So then I was like Bucks or Nets, and I'm like, man, the Nets on paper probably have a little more talent, but there's just something about Kyrie Irving that really rubs me wrong. Like, he's not a very good teammate, and we've seen the Celtics, we've seen the Nets. These teams play better without him out there. I think earlier in his career when he played with LeBron, he was a little bit less cocky, and I think he was a little bit more willing to be sort of that second option. So I'm going to go with the Bucks just because I just don't trust Kyrie Irving. There's just something about him as a leader, as a winner, as a person that rubs me wrong, and I don't know that Kyrie-Durant relationship will go as good as it probably could. I do think Durant is incredible, so certainly would not surprise me. I think the Bucks, though, I'm picking the Bucks because I would prefer to see the Bucks. Between those 2 teams, I think it's a total toss-up. But I just have a feeling that the Bucks finally put it together in the playoffs, and Giannis gets rewarded for loyalty. Drew Holiday helps him out on both sides of the ball. I think Milwaukee, maybe because they have more camaraderie, wins a close 7-game series against the Nets in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, no, culture is a big part of what makes up a team. That's kind of how we saw a team like the Denver Nuggets actually overcome a team that had a little bit more talent on paper with the LA Clippers last year to make it to the Western Conference Finals. So that kind of takes us to the Western champs of this year. I think the front runner pretty clearly is the Los Angeles Lakers. Certainly there is a lot of talent in the West, but the issue is that there's a pretty big giant at the top. Eastern fans, for me being a Chicago Bulls fan, we dealt a lot with LeBron James sitting at the top for a long time. Looks like the West is going to be dealing with the same thing. The Lakers were really good last year and got even better when you consider the talent they added with Dennis Schroeder, Wesley Matthews, Montrezl Harrell, Marc Gasol. I think it's going to be tough for anybody to topple the Lakers out west.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go with the Lakers here. You have the top 2 players in the NBA, and then just kind of reloaded on the bench. So, Lakers out of the West, and they'll probably win. I mean, you got to pick them to win.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. What's crazy is they added Montrezl Harrell, who was 6th man, and I think Schroeder, however you say it, was like second behind him in the 6th man voting. He might be a starter this year. Wesley Matthews, Marc Gasol, a veteran. Talen Horton-Tucker, I don't know if you guys follow NBA preseason hoops at all.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy has been putting up like 30 points per game in the preseason. And you didn't even mention Kyle Kuzma, who LeBron handpicked himself as the breakout star of this next season. And, they were 4-0 in the preseason. I know the preseason doesn't mean much, but, man, their role players are hungry. LeBron James is hungry. He wants to catch Michael Jordan for those 6 NBA rings. Anthony Davis and LeBron, again, very early, doesn't mean much, but they both shot the 3 really well in the preseason I saw in the game against the Suns. So if those guys are even shooting remotely close to what they shot in the preseason from 3-point range, look out, NBA. I actually think the West is kind of weird. First off, people said, well, LeBron only wins because he goes in the East. Well, he goes in the West, and he's dominating now, too. So back off LeBron James. He wins because he is LeBron James, and he's the best player in the league. He is the best ever or second best ever, depending on who you go with between him and Jordan. I think this Lakers team has the potential to be one of the all-time great teams if they choose to pursue a regular season. The West is really weird because I would argue that there's never been more good teams and more depth in the history of the league than what we see in the West. However, the West is lacking great teams. The Lakers are really the only great team in the Western Conference. I think the Clippers, some say, have potential to be a great team, but I don't know that I buy that because simply I think Paul George is vastly overrated. We've seen him not deliver in the playoffs. He's not a great field goal percentage guy. He's not a great assist guy. So I think Paul George gets way too much credit as a co-star to Kawhi Leonard. So I don't really buy the Clippers as a great team. But I think the Lakers are the only great team in the NBA. I think we talk about this every week with our NFL talk. Well, if they put it all together, what's this team out of the NFC missing? What's this team who's going to beat the Chiefs? Well, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. The Lakers are the Lakers. They're the teams to beat, and no one is going to beat them, especially the Lakers, given that it's a 7-game series. You know, you can catch the Chiefs in a 1-game scenario, but I don't think anyone's catching the Lakers. I would bet the Lakers over the field. Is it plus like 400 or something? You can look up the betting odds, Drew, but I would lock in.
Shorter than that. It's definitely shorter than that.
Shorter than that? Well, I would take whatever.
Probably plus 275 or something, plus 250.
Okay, well, I would still take that plus 250 and bet on the Lakers to win it all.
I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you have literally like the 2 best players, or even if you want to quibble with the rankings, 2 of the top 5 players in the NBA. Like that's where you see like the big difference. Where they, you know, if you take the Lakers out of the equation, then you have a really compelling conversation about who's the best team in the NBA. But when you take LeBron James, who's been up there as, you know, the best player in the league for most of his career, and then you consistently put him with another great player, like, yeah, it's going to be near impossible to stop. So I think Lakers are a pretty clear-cut favorite for winning the NBA Finals. I'm assuming, you know, you've made it beyond no uncertain terms, you're sure that the Lakers are going to win it all.
Yeah, it's a lock. Lock of the year. I would say of any sports franchise right now in the world, in terms of who is most likely to win a championship, I would say the Lakers are hands down the most likely, given how in baseball and hockey there's some luck involved. You know, in soccer and football, we've got the 1-game scenarios. In a 7-game series, I don't think anyone can touch the Lakers, quite frankly. And it's simple because when LeBron and Anthony Davis need a bucket, they can score in the paint. You know, they're not the Warriors who are 72 and 10. You know, Clay and Curry get hot from 3. You hope to somehow beat them in a series. You know, the Cavs somehow did it. But I just, if LeBron needs a bucket, he's going to the hoop. You're in trouble. So 7-game series, no way, Jose.
Drew, are you as certain as Common is on the Lakers, or do you have somebody else in mind?
I mean, there's no such thing as locks. So, no, I mean, I'm a value guy, right? Like, I'm not going to just take the chalk, but they're very good. So, I mean, that it's got to be the prediction, right?
Absolutely. And
I would probably. Oh, go ahead.
Night and cover -2.5, -3. No problem.
No problem at all. So I'm going to go a little bit against the grain on this one. I'm actually going to go with my Eastern Conference team to win, just to be a little bit different. I know that the Lakers are probably going to be the team that wins it, but just to be a little bit of devil's advocate, if there's any team that can beat the Lakers, it's going to be a team like the Nets, where you have a lot of depth, a lot of options that you can throw. We saw a problem that the Heat had was that outside of Bam Adebayo, you had nobody to guard Anthony Davis last year. Jared Allen can match up pretty well with Anthony Davis. And you also have DeAndre Jordan, who's not nearly as mobile, but definitely has the length to keep up with him as well. And then when you consider Karis LeVert, Kevin Durant, Taurean Prince, you have enough players that can kind of take turns guarding LeBron James in the finals to give a little bit of help to him there. I think the X factor is going to be how well Kyrie Irving plays, because who's going to be your ball-dominant defender for a point guard? I mean, LeBron James can definitely do it in spurts. He's shown that. But who's going to do it consistently over a game, over a series? I think if we see Kyrie Irving kind of go off how he did when the Cavaliers won the finals, and Durant is pretty much near impossible to stop with his jump shot. I think that the Nets stand a pretty decent chance of beating the Lakers. I know the Lakers are still going to be favored, but I'm going to go counter here and go with the Brooklyn Nets, just to be a little bit different, so we don't have everybody same at that bottom third spot for the experts.
All right, a couple quick
awesome, great pick.
Don't worry, Drew. This reminds me of when Drew picked the Knicks to win the finals in 2013, just to bother me, and he was way off. The Knicks did not win the finals in 2013. You're going from another team in that same metropolitan area with
different borough.
A different borough. I'll say this. In the modern-day NBA as well as the modern-day NFL, and just modern-day sports in general, with the way the rules are done, with the way we can strategize, and with the athleticism and talent we have, great offense beats great defense. No one's going to stop LeBron James. No one's going to stop Anthony Davis. They're too big. They're too strong. Certainly Durant is pretty much unstoppable. Kyrie is borderline unstoppable, but he's a little bit smaller. If his jump shot's not falling, they can hope to contain him a little bit. But I can't wait to see it. Certainly taking the Lakers. Lakers are one of my favorite teams in sports, by the way, because they have LeBron James. He's one of the 4 can't-miss athletes, I say. Lionel Messi, LeBron James, Roger Federer, and, of course, Patrick Mahomes, the GOAT. Whenever those 4 play, my eyes are glued to the TV. So, I don't know, you guys have favorite teams. We're doing this little Christmas holiday gift out. We're going to give a gift out to our favorite sports team. Guys, what are you gifting to your sports teams for Christmas this year?
Yeah, so I definitely didn't read the question correctly, so I'm just going to roll with what I got, though. I thought it was just give a gift to a team who needs it, or who not who needs it, but I tried to be funny here. But I'm going to give icy hot to the Lakers. They'll need it. LeBron turning 36 this month, 18th season. Now the NBA will fine teams $100,000 if players sit during nationally televised games. The Lakers have 16 of them. That's the most in the NBA. LeBron and Anthony Davis and company gonna need some icy hot in order to get through the season because no more load management.
Real quick, I love what the NBA did. However, they're not finding them for back-to-backs and non-televised games. I believe in back-to-back, a non-televised game, they're adding a lot of flexibility. So the NBA took like a middle ground with that, where they made sure not to punish them on the nationally televised, or rather to punish them on nationally televised, non-nationally televised, specifically back-to-back. And they even wrote in specifically with teams that played a lot last year. They're more lenient. So I do think LeBron will get some rest in some of those non-televised games. Also, I think that no matter what, LeBron James is so physically built and strong and powerful that, gosh, I don't even know if he needs rest. Anywho, Tom, what do you got?
So I did come up with something specific, but after further thought, it was inconsiderate of me. So I'm just going to go with a generic present to one of my favorite sports team, the Chicago White Sox. This team is in the most fun point of any franchise's story arc, where they're getting good and they're about to start that climb to perhaps becoming the best team in their sport. It's a really fun time to be a White Sox fan. Here's hoping that they're able to return a present to their fans in 2021 and beyond.
The present, could it potentially be a World Series, or is it too early?
It depends on the off season's not over yet. They can definitely make a couple of moves. It's more going to come down to how does Tony La Russa get the clubhouse to gel, considering some of his issues that he's been going through in the past few months. If he's able to have any sort of credibility or respect within that clubhouse. I mean, if I could give the gift of imposing respect on another individual, I would. That's a little less fun as a Sox fan, but the players on the field are really fun to watch. Here's this. How about gold chains for everybody? Because that's something that the White Sox have been doing. Eloy Jimenez going out there with the jersey half unbuttoned and just wearing the thick gold chain. I'm going to give gold chains to the Chicago White Sox players. Go out there and just drip with all that swag. Go for it.
I love it. Gold chains. Castleman, by the way, if you guys may not know this, is a very talented singer. He sings Macklemore songs, he puts the fur coat, thrift shopper. Very good singer for the viewers that don't know that. Very talented artist we have on our own show.
I am limited at best.
He's being very, very modest. My gift to my favorite team, I'm going to go with Barcelona Soccer and Lionel Messi. It's a new year. It's a fresh start. They've got new president elections in January to elect the new team, a manager. They actually have a very unique system where they don't have a single president. You know, they vote for it. The owners of the clubs and the stock, they vote for a president. So they're going to have open elections for a president. And like they can vote a president in, they can vote him out. So it's very unique what they have. I'm going to give them some new hope, and I'm going to give them a rejuvenized Lionel Messi. Messi has been very upset at Barcelona the last year, wanted to leave in the summer. Now he says he's more happy. It remains to be seen whether he comes back next year. But the last 3 games, he scored a goal in 3 straight games. He's starting to look back to his old form a little bit. Well, I'm hoping to see him fully at his old form. You give Messi where he's the best player in the world. You get to the new year. You get to the new president. It's a sort of new hope. And you give him the La Liga championship. And you go ahead and give him the Champions League. They're going to get lucky. Bayern Munich, something goes wrong at some point. I'm hoping for Barcelona to get some luck in the Champions League. If all things go right, and maybe they win that, it's unrealistic, but I'm gifting him a lot of luck and a rejuvenized Lionel Messi, hopefully playing like the best player in the world that we've seen him over the years. Because this year, so far this season, is the first time I've ever watched soccer where I've said Messi might not be the best player in the world anymore. Well, I'm hoping he comes rejuvenated in 2021.
I got another gift for my favorite team, since we're doing that for your favorite team. I'm going to give super glue to the Dallas Cowboys. They dropped the ball a lot. CeeDee Lamb, second in the league with 8 drops this season. Ezekiel Elliott has 5 drops. He has at least 5 fumbles as well. So those guys need some super glue. And then maybe you could also, glue, Andy Dalton's injury and make it better. Who knows? Dak Prescott.
Yeah, they could probably put permanent glue on Dak Prescott so he doesn't get hurt.
Yes.
Although who knows how much longer he'll be there with all that contract salary stuff.
Yeah, that's a whole different situation.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness.
Locks of the week time. My favorite segment. So real quick, season records. Common still in first place, 14-11-2, 14 wins, 11 losses, 2 ties. Drew is 4 back, 10-15-2. Tom is 10-17. So he's 4 wins back, but he doesn't have the ties.
Mm-hmm.
Last week I went 1-1-1. I went away from my all NFL strategy, which was working well, and I had 1 bad week. I'm going to go back to all NFL this week. I hit my Dolphins 1.5 over the Pats. They won by 10. Mississippi State demolished Mizzou. I had Mizzou winning that. That didn't go well. And then I was washed on my Sevilla over 2 goals in their soccer game. It was exactly 2 goals. Drew was 1-2. He finally missed on an English Premier League over-under. He had under 2.5 in the Everton-Arsenal game. There was 3 goals, but they all came in the first half. So he was close, but in another sense, he wasn't close at all. So he was bound to lose one. He got the Cowboys +3 versus the 49ers. They went outright, and he had the Colts -7.5 over the Texans. So they won by 7. So that was a close one. Very close one right there. And then Tom had his best week ever, 2-1. Titans -11 over the Lions. They easily won. Bears +3 versus the Vikings. They went outright. And then he missed the Chicago State. He had Northern Illinois -16 over Chicago State. He had some insider information, apparently not talking to the right insider, because Northern Illinois won by 10. Chicago State did not cover.
I was missing a little bit of information, found out after the fact that Northern Illinois is 0-5 on the season and 0-5 against the spread as well. So it was kind of, fade meets fade on that one.
He was misinformed. He had the insider information on a bad team when he could have had even better information.
Mm-hmm. It was unfortunate, yes, but got that one out of the way on Friday evening. To get to my picks for this week, my locks, we're going to spread it around a little bit across sports and across leagues. Let's start out Christmas Day, a big matchup for the NBA coming back. We have the Lakers covering -6 on the Dallas Mavericks. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, because it's a primetime game, will be full go. Kristaps Porzingis not in for the Mavericks. I'm going to look for the Lakers' talent to win out fairly heavily over the Dallas Mavericks. Bears did well by me last week, and I'm going to count on them again. The Jacksonville Jaguars have looked horrible all season long. Give me the Bears covering 7.5. It's a pretty gaudy number for them to try to get, but they're looking to make it to the playoffs. I think they can hit that number. And then the day after Christmas, the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers are favored by 7 against Liberty. Give me Coastal Carolina to win that by more than a touchdown.
Love it. Drew, what do you got?
Well, first of all, the Warriors and Nets game going on right now, the Nets have put up 40 points so far in the first quarter of that game. So goodness gracious, doesn't bode well for my picks here. But I'll go to the NBA well on Christmas Day. Pelicans.
The season, and this guy's making proclamations.
What?
We're a quarter into the NBA season, and it doesn't look good for your picks.
Didn't you say, like, after one NFL game there's a particular quarterback who's going to the Hall of Fame? I don't think you have any room to talk on making premature, grandiose calls and decisions.
By the way, that'll be a really interesting one because I think he was on his way, but now he probably won't make it. Was it Cam Newton you're referencing?
I think it was Cam Newton, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just name that, top pick. Cam Newton, Dwayne Haskins, probably. Or not Dwayne Haskins. Sorry. Robert Griffin III. That definitely happened, 10 years ago.
Any of those guys Hall of Famers except for Cam Newton. But you didn't give me credit for calling Stephen Curry a Hall of Famer in 2013.
No, that's totally fine. I'm just saying, yes, Drew's calling a season one quarter in, but you're calling whole careers just one game in.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's no proclamation, though. You'll see where I'm going with it. But I'm going to go to the NBA well, as Tom did, Christmas Day. I like the Pelicans +5 over the Miami Heat. And then the Celtics +1 at home at TD Garden versus the Nets. A little upset there. And then, of course, my final pick, EPL, Manchester United and Leicester City on Saturday, under 3 goals in that contest. At least I think it's Manchester United. Let me make sure it's not Manchester City.
And are you referencing Leicester City?
I have no clue. Sure.
They're the team who had the biggest win in the history of betting. They were the biggest underdog to win the Premier League, and they won it like a few years ago.
Yes, I am referencing that team.
For the record, Drew, I would like to say you're going to be completely wrong on this game just because Manchester United is scoring goals like crazy, and they've played a ton of high-scoring games. So if it is Manchester United, I would take it to the bank and go against what you picked.
It is Manchester United.
Okay, yeah, you're wrong on that one.
Well, Drew, you mentioned that you thought it was Man City. Do you want to change the lock since it's a different team?
No, I just wanted to make sure I had the... No, I'm not changing.
Okay.
No. I just want to make sure I typed it in right.
All right, my locks of the week. I'm going to the well again with the Dolphins. They did me good last week. By the way, the Dolphins are 11-3 against the spread this year. No one in the National Football League is better. Vegas continually underrates these guys. I got the Dolphins -3 at the Raiders. The Raiders have been dreadful recently. They've lost 4 to 5 games. The only win was beating the Jets barely. We're not sure whether Derek Carr will play in this game or not, but quite frankly, it doesn't matter. The Dolphins are pretty safe cover against the Raiders. I'm going to go to the Chiefs for this next one. The Chiefs have played a lot of close games of late, People are like they're winning, but why are they winning by one score? Well, this is going to be the week where they blow a team out. It's been coming. It's going to happen this week. This is kind of their chance to wrap up the division, and they can get a little bit of rest the next week, and then they can have a full-out bye week. We know Mahomes is number one in the league. The Chiefs are in passing yards. Atlanta Falcons pass defense, number 31, second to last in the National Football League. And after Mahomes gets done with them, they might be down to number 32. So that's how poor their pass defense is. Tom Brady had like 390 yards, a lot of those coming in the second half this last game. Atlanta has nothing to play for. Kansas City wins, covering those 10.5 points, no problem. And finally, I hate this line because it keeps moving, but you know what? I'm going to stick with it. Originally had the Cardinals -3 against the 49ers. I just saw it was all the way up to 5 points, but I still I like Kyler Murray. I like how he's using his legs again. The 49ers have too many injuries. They're eliminated from the playoff chase. Arizona already beat them earlier this year when San Fran actually had a decent team together. So I think the Cardinals cover. I take Cardinals -5.
All right, sounds good. Looking forward to an exciting week and seeing a lot of interesting outcomes. Moving into statements of the week and salutes. Drew, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I have I do want to hear Common's thoughts and also your thoughts on this, Tom. But the NBA has chosen to take away the Milwaukee Bucks 2022 second-round pick due to tampering. I don't know how you enforce this rule. Everybody does it. It's kind of a don't ask, don't tell type of deal. I don't know how you enforce this, and especially with Bogdanovich. I mean, it's just crazy that the NBA did this. I don't know if they're trying to set a precedent of the future or something like that, but it is just so difficult to enforce a rule like this. And guys are just talking to each other. A lot of these guys are friends. So I don't know how you enforce it, but I don't like that move by the NBA.
And didn't they? So hold on, they gave a penalty to them with the Bogdanovich, and Bogdanovich isn't even on their team. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. So that was where he was on Sacramento.
Yes. It was just the timing of the transaction.
They didn't even end up signing him, though. Didn't he go to the Hawks or something?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a sign and trade that they were looking to set up.
Well, now he's on the Hawks.
Yeah.
Right. So they're punishing them for a player they didn't even get, though. That's my point. That's funny.
Yeah. No, it's some weird thing.
No, it was supposed to be for a deal that would have sent him to the Kings.
Hello? Yeah, he's still there. No,
Hello?
you're looking to break up. No, I believe, and I wasn't prepared.
Did you hear what I said?
No, it was supposed to be for a deal where the Bucks were trading for him, or I don't remember what the deal was, but I know that he's on the Hawks, so they didn't even get him, though, is what I'm saying.
Well, the deal would have sent Bogdan to Milwaukee, while the Kings would have received a bunch of players.
Correct.
So the deal,
the irony behind this is that they're punishing the Bucks for a deal that didn't even go through. That makes it even
yes.
Yeah, I don't get that move either on the NBA's part. I mean, like you mentioned, like all these there's no issue with players talking about other players. It's only the teams that cannot talk about players while they're under contract. And the NBA even kind of like accounts for this by having a scot-free moratorium where it's like, okay, you can talk to players for like 3 days before you're allowed to sign them. They give a little bit of a grace period. I guess Milwaukee was in violation of even that. Like, I don't understand the move. I mean, granted, it's a second-round pick for a team that's probably going to be in the top 4 or 5 teams of the league, which means they have a bottom 55 pick, so it's not really all that punitive, but definitely a weird, strange move that I don't understand some of the rules that are in place and why they can't have them.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really like it. Tom, what do you have for your statement of the week?
So first, a quick salute. We had Pro Bowls announcements being made for the Chicago Bears. Khalil Mack, the pass rusher for the Chicago Bears, and returner Cordero Patterson being named to the Pro Bowl. So salute to them. And I think a couple of snubs. I think linebacker Roquan Smith and cornerback Kyle Fuller should have been in as well. But maybe next season. They've been playing fantastic ball this year. For my statement of the week, the most disliked individual for me in sports, Washington football owner Dan Snyder is in the news. The Washington Post reported today that the football team paid $1.6 million to settle a sexual misconduct claim against Snyder in 2009. This thing has been under wraps for 11 years. This confidential settlement became public while the NFL investigated the franchise for more than 40 claims of sexual harassment and misconduct against former and current employees of the franchise. However, this is the first accusation leveled directly at the team owner, Dan Snyder, who to this point has skirted the consequences for his sordid activity within the organization. My statement of the week is this. It is time for Dan Snyder to be forced to sell the team out of his role as an NFL owner. There is precedent for this. Former owner of the Carolina Panthers, Jerry Richardson, faced a similar fate, selling his franchise back in 2017 after facing sexual misconduct accusations, as well as the use of racial language in the workplace.
Donald Sterling for the Clippers, too. Wasn't it the same?
He was forced out as well. It sucks, in my opinion, that a lewd, crass, and horrendous individual such as Dan Snyder will be allowed to profit off the sale of the franchise. He bought it in 1999 for $750 million. It is now currently being valued at $3.4 billion, so massive multiplier on that one. But at the very least, he will be out of a powerful position under which dozens, if not potentially hundreds of women have been mistreated and abused during his tenure. This hurt cannot be undone, but at the very least must not be allowed to continue.
Yeah, certainly no disagreements there. I don't know what will happen, but that's why it's so frustrating, because I want to cheer for the Washington football team because they have Alex Smith and J.D. McKissick, but then you got Dan Snyder. Also, real quick, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing. I'm not going to make jokes, but I don't know if you guys heard about Dwayne Haskins and what he got in trouble for.
Maskless in a particular establishment, yes.
He went to the strip club without a mask on, and there was a photo. So, needless to say, things are not.
There's a lot to not like in Washington.
Washington football team. My statement of the week, and I kind of talked about it earlier, so maybe it's a repeat. I didn't mean to talk about it that much earlier, but I'm just going to go ahead and roll with it, because this is what I feel passionate about this week. So if it's a repeat, it's a repeat. I don't feel any sympathy for the group of five not making the playoff. No sympathy at all, because it's about the schedule and who you play. If you're a group of five team and you want to make the playoff, you go play at Alabama, you play at Florida, you play at Ohio State, you go on the road, you take a chance, you win the game, you make the playoffs. Cincinnati didn't beat anybody all year long. The only decent teams they played, they squeaked by them. Tulsa barely beat them at home by 3 points. They had a chance to make a statement to the committee. They were at home. Well, they barely won that game. They barely beat UCF, who had a down year. They were not deserving of a college football playoff. I don't feel bad for Cincinnati. Cincinnati, UCF, Boise State, teams like that, they need to go out and play the big dogs in the non-conference. They need to take a risk. Yes, they won't get a home and home. They just go on the road, hope for the best. If they want to make the playoff, instead of whining how the cards are stacked against them, they got to go out there and do it. They got to prove it. They got to take a risk. In life, it's easy to complain. It's easy to whine. What do you do when things aren't going your way? Well, you take a look at yourself in the mirror and you see, what can I do? If you're a group of five team, the committee has told you under the current 4 playoff system, we're not letting you in. Well, guess what? In that case, you go out and you schedule one of those top teams in the country on the road, one game in their house, and you hope for the best, and you hope to prove yourself, and that's just how it works. Life isn't fair sometimes, but stop crying about it and do something about it, group of 5 teams.
Yeah, I think that's a completely fair assessment. I think, if you want to have like a little bit of discussion on it, like what happens when, you schedule a team that isn't a Power 5 team, looks pretty good. What happens if that team, like let's just say Oklahoma struggled earlier this year, like if a team of that caliber or a program of that caliber has a down year themselves, like does that then punish the Group of 5 team who could have no way of necessarily knowing how a preseason ranked team may fare as the year goes on? Like, how do you think the committee would weigh that, or rather, how would you weigh that if you were on the committee, I guess?
Well, I hate to say this, but I mean, I'm all about putting the best 4 teams in, and if that team happened to have a down year, well, you're probably out of luck. But still, though, I would urge them to schedule maybe not Alabama or Clemson. But if you schedule someone who's really good, Oklahoma started bad this year, but it's not likely they do that again. And, they put it together. I don't know. I think you look at the resume, and you may not luck out in that scenario. You may have a year where you get that win, and it doesn't lead to anything, but you still got to take the chances. And like I said, if you're a program who's consistently there, say Cincinnati is very good for the next few years, then you kind of build yourself some hope, and you schedule those teams constantly, year after year after year. Because I'll be honest with you, you've got nothing to lose. If you're a Group of 5 team and you go, 11-1, and your one loss is a close game at Ohio State or at Florida, you will still get in a New Year's Six Bowl over a team that goes 12-0 and plays nobody.
That's fair. So if you had a team like, let's say, Penn State preseason was ranked pretty highly, and then they ended up having a really, really bad year, like is that something that would count against the Group of 5 team?
It doesn't look as good, quite frankly. Yeah.
So even if they try,
you also have to get that Power 5 or top 10 team to invite that Group of 5 team. Like, if you're one of those teams, you don't want to play a game like that and lose, right?
Well, I'm saying you don't have as
like
much.
When you rather.
I think.
Yeah, but when you would rather play your first game of the season, it's kind of a preseason game. You pay, if you're Arkansas, you pay somebody to come play you, like not Arkansas State, but an FCS team.
Those will never play. Those teams.
Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't say it, because those guys don't play in football.
I can go on for hours on that.
They played in baseball, though, didn't they?
Yeah, they played in.
They played in baseball.
Yeah, and it was like historic or something. But I'll
it was huge. Yeah.
I'll tell you this, Drew. I really don't think the Group of 5 team has that much to lose. I kind of said it. I mean, yeah, you schedule that game and lose, but if that's your only loss, and if you keep it somewhat respectable, like you go on the road, say at Notre Dame or at Oklahoma, and you lose by 7 points, and then you've got a Coastal Carolina who's 12-0, they didn't play those teams, and you're a Cincinnati. I mean, the committee is all about, your record. We saw it with Florida. Florida lost to Alabama by 6 points, and they have 3 losses, and they didn't really go down in the rankings. I think the committee does reward good losses. We saw it with Notre Dame, too. They're still in the committee despite losing to Clemson. So I think you have nothing to lose by playing one of those games. Don't schedule 2 of them in the same season, if that's what you're thinking then. But I would argue one in the same season, say Oklahoma, or rather Cincinnati, finished the season undefeated, and they had a road win at Texas A&M, for example, whose only loss is Alabama, they'd probably be in the playoff right now. So.
But I'm just asking, what's the motivation? What's the motivation for Texas A&M to schedule that game instead of scheduling a game against Texas A&M Corpus Christi or something, a smaller football school?
A team like A&M or Oklahoma, maybe looking at the 5th or 6th best team in the country, it does a lot for them just because they need more good wins. We saw it with A&M. They had 1 loss to Alabama, and they still didn't make the playoff. So I would say, and I think they will get shut down by some of those teams. some of those teams will say, look, we don't want to play someone that good this early. We don't want to look bad. But there's enough of them. There's about 10 elite blue blood programs in the country. If you ask all 10 of them to play, I'm willing to bet that one of those 10 teams will be willing to play you. As long as it's at their house, and that's how it's going to be. I know it's not fair, but that's how it's going to have to be. In order to get that matchup, you'll have to go on the road, play them one game, none of this one-and-one stuff, none of this compromise.
No home and home.
You play at their house, you get your one chance, and you hope for the best. And if you lose respectfully, you'll still get in a New Year's Six Bowl. Because right now, you're not getting in the playoff if you go undefeated. An undefeated record without a top 10 win means nothing to the committee. Nothing. They've shown it. I mean, literally means nothing. We had 2 undefeated group of 5 teams, and neither of them were in the top 6 rankings. Neither of them were close to making the playoff. They weren't even close.
Okay.
Yeah. Anywho, that does it for week 11 of Salute Your Sports. We'll be back next week. A lot of good talk. We'll talk about the CFP, maybe Ohio State not getting enough respect when it comes to the lines for betting. I'll have more on that probably. But we'll do the Salute Your Sports, NFL, college football, and more next week. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, wherever you're celebrating. And
Happy holidays.
not being best dressed for the show. Bye, guys.
Yes, happy holidays.